Hello everyone, welcome to Raaonline. Today we will discuss our new chapter, that is human reproduction, in which developmental embryology is also involved, right? According to NCERT, it is one chapter, clear, that is the human reproduction. When we talk about that human reproduction, we know that human reproduction reproduce, right? Reproduce, that is to give the birth like same species, right? To give the birth their young ones actually, right? How they develop, how the process is possible, the fertilization, the process of gametogenesis, how the gametes are formed, right? Then when, at what time fertilization occurs, the days of the fertilization, right? The menstrual cycle, the reproductive organs of the male and the females and their roles with their secretions, right? The cleavage, all these processes comes under that chapter, right? So we will discuss the summary of that chapter in the form of the questions, right? So come to the first question. Choose the wrong statement. Theca interna produces the estrogen hormones. Is it right or wrong? It is right, right? Ovulation occur in secondary oocyte stage, right? Total 3 polar bodies are formed from one primary oocyte, correct? Vitellogenesis occurs during the spermatogenesis, wrong. So the answer of that question is the vitellogenesis, that is the D, right? Occurs during the spermatogenesis. Now in these three options, or in all these three, there are number of informations, right? Come to the first, you have to know that what is theca interna, right? You have to first know that what is theca interna and how they produce the estrogen hormone, right? So as we know that in females, the oocytes, the ovarian follicles is formed just before the birth. After the birth, there is no chances of the formation of the ovarian follicles. They just get mature in the influence of the FSH, right? So when in the influence of FSH, that primordial follicle mature and converts into the primary follicle. Primary follicle converts into the secondary follicle. Secondary follicle converts into tertiary follicle. And that tertiary follicle, in the influence of FSH, converted into the Graafian follicle, right? Converted into the Graafian follicle. And what is Graafian follicle? That is the mature ovarian follicle is known as the Graafian follicle, right? Mature ovarian follicle is known as the Graafian follicle. All these processes occurs in the influence of the FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, right? Follicle stimulating hormone, as its name suggests, follicle stimulating, that means they stimulate the follicles for the maturation. In the influence of FSH, 6 to 8 ovarian follicles goes for the maturation, but only one follicle gets mature completely and converted into the Graafian follicle, right? Clear? So after that, what will happen? In that Graafian follicle, you can see in that Graafian follicle there are some layers, right? That is, outer fibrous is called the theca externa, inner cellular is called the theca interna, right? So these are the layers of the Graafian follicle, right? These are the layers of the Graafian follicle, coverings of the Graafian follicles, and you can see here that is the basal lamina. These are the membrana granulosa cells, right? These are the granulosa cells, and that is called the antrum, right? That layer is, that cavity is known as the antrum, right? And that antrum is filled with the fluid which is estrogen rich, right? That antrum is fluid with the follicular fluid, and that follicular fluid is rich in the estrogen, and due to the increased amount of that estrogen at the ovarian surface, a stigma is formed, right? Through which the stigma get burst, and what will happen, the secondary oocyte released into the fallopian tube, right? So in that way, that's why that first line proved that the theca interna produces the estrogen hormone, because it is the layer of the Graafian follicle, right? It is layer of the Graafian follicle. Now what will happen, that Graafian follicle, which is the mature ovarian follicle, right, at that time, for the ovulation, LH is acts upon the Graafian follicle, right? LH and estrogen, which is present in the antrum of the Graafian follicle, right? LH stimulates the ovulation process, which is called the LH surge, right? And ovulation occur. Ovulation, that means what? The release of the secondary oocyte after rupturing of the Graafian follicle. That process is known as the ovulation, and it occurs in the presence of the LH hormone, that is luteinizing hormone. That's why that process is also known as the LH surge, right? For LH, a sentence is here, a marked line is here, that is LH acts as a trigger for ovulation, right? LH acts as a trigger for the ovulation. Clear? Now what will happen? Ovulation occurs, but now this Graafian follicle is converted into the corpus hemorrhagicum. This is the intermediate stage which is not given in the NCERT, but it occurs, right, before the formation of the corpus luteum. That corpus hemorrhagicum, that blood clot occurs in that stage, right, and it gets degenerate in the influence of LH. Lutein pigment is formed here, right? Lutein pigment is formed here, and the another one, the temporary endocrine structure is formed, which is called the corpus luteum, right, which is called the corpus luteum. Which is called the corpus luteum. Clear? So that is the corpus hemorrhagicum. Corpus hemorrhagicum, in the influence of LH, it converts into the corpus luteum. Now what will happen? That corpus luteum is a temporary endocrine structure. Why it is called the temporary endocrine structure? Because it secretes the estrogen and progesterone hormone, right? Secretes the estrogen and mainly progesterone hormone, right? It secretes mainly it secretes estrogen and progesterone both, but mainly progesterone hormone, right? And what will happen? Why it is called the temporary endocrine structure? 2017 NEET paper, that question is asked actually, right? Because it is temporary, because if the fertilization is not occur, so just before the LMP, that is the last menstrual period, just 2 days prior to that menstrual period, that corpus luteum gets degenerate due to the low level of the LH, estrogen and the progesterone, right? And what will happen after that? The menstruation cycle will appear. Clear? That's why it is called the temporary endocrine structure. Even if the fertilization occur, then what will happen? Now there are two conditions. If the fertilization absent, right, then what will happen? It gets degenerate, right? Corpus luteum gets degenerate and converted into the corpus albicans, right? But when if the fertilization present, that means it occurs, then what will happen? It is called now the corpus luteum of the pregnancy. Until the formation of the placenta up to the 3rd month, it is maintained as it is, right, to maintain the level of the hormones, right, that is the progesterone and maximum amount, right. So that's why it converts into the corpus luteum of pregnancy. Clear? After the formation of the placenta, that corpus luteum gets degenerate. Clear? So in that manner, that is the ovarian changes also which occurs at the time of the menstrual cycle, right? That is the Graafian follicle, which is important, and which is called the mature ovarian follicle, right, which is called the mature ovarian follicle. And you can see that is the secondary oocyte, right, that this one is the secondary oocyte. So ovulation occur in the secondary oocyte stage, so that statement is also proved with that diagram. Clear? That the ovulation occur in the secondary oocyte stage. That's why I told you that at the time of ovulation, secondary oocyte release into fallopian tube. Clear? Total 3 polar bodies are formed from one primary oocyte. Now this is the question of the oogenesis, right? What will happen? See here. What is the meaning of that? And first we have to know that the vitellogenesis is absent in the human beings, right? Because our egg is the alecythal, so vitellogenesis is not occurs in the humans. Clear? And not specifically in the spermatogenesis. Clear? So that statement is wrong. Then we have to know what is that primary oocyte and what are these 3 polar bodies, right? Primary oocyte, you see here, we're talking about now oogenesis, the process of oogenesis, which is completed in the 3 phases, that is multiplication phase, growth phase and the maturation phase, right? And the longest phase of the oogenesis is the maturation phase. what will happen in that oogenesis? Oogenesis, that is the formation of egg or the ova. As we know that, we already know that the in female fetus, right, at the time of embryonic development, what will happen? The formation of the follicles are completed. After the birth, it is not possible the formation of the ovarian follicle. That's why, due to the hormonal imbalance, you heard that just before 3 to 4 years, in 8th month baby, menstrual cycle is appear, right? Just due to the hormonal imbalance, if the ovary gets functional in that stage, that it will happen. Clear? So what will happen in that oogenesis? It is completed in 3 phases. First one is the multiplication phase, right? First one is the multiplication phase. Second is the growth phase. And third one is the maturation phase, right? Multiplication phase, growth phase and the maturation phase. Now what will happen? See here that this is the chart of the oogenesis. Meiosis and mitosis both occur in the gametogenesis process, and in multiplication phase, through the mitosis, what will happen? The oogonium cells, that is the stem cells, are formed, right? Stem cells, and again by the mitosis, that oogonium forms the primary oocyte, right? That is the primary egg, and that primary oocyte and that oogonium are same in the ploidy nature, that is both are the diploid cells, right? What will happen now? In that primary oocyte, which is the diploid cell, growth phase occurs here, right? And that primary oocyte is arrested in the prophase 1, which is present at the time of the birth, right? That means the before the that oogenesis is completed at the 25th week of the pregnancy if the child is female fetus, right? So that primary oocyte arrested in that stage, right, till the puberty. Now what will happen when after attaining the puberty, when female ovary gets functional in state, right, and estrogen progesterone hormones are dominating in nature, then what will happen? From each month from the puberty to the menopause, that primary oocyte, right, that primary oocyte again first meiosis, through first meiosis 1 occur, right, and what will happen? There are two cells are formed. Clear? Meiosis 1 occur, which completed by 1 primary oocyte each month, right? So what will happen here? When meiosis 1 occurs, the secondary oocyte is formed and one is polar body, that is the first polar body is formed, but that first polar body is actually gets degenerate, right? That secondary oocyte, which is arrested in the metaphase 2 till the entry of the sperm, that is the fertilization, right? If the fertilization occur, then metaphase 2 is completed. If not, then it will not be completed, right? So what will happen in meiosis 2? Again, that is converted into the ovum, right? Meiosis 2, it is converted into the ovum, that is ooted formation. Ooted, when the maturation and the differentiation occurs in that ooted, it is converted into the ovum and form the second polar body. And that first polar body again through the meiosis 2, what will happen? It again divided into that polar bodies, but these polar bodies gets degenerated, right? In that way we know that the total 3 polar bodies are formed from 1 primary oocyte. Total 3 polar bodies are formed from 1 polar primary oocyte. You can see here 1, 2, 3. But these 2 gets degenerate. Only second polar body gets functional in state, right? With 1 ovum. So 1 primary oocyte one primary oocyte forms 3 polar bodies and 1 ovum, right? The longest phase is the maturation phase. But when we talk about the spermatogenesis, the longest phase of spermatogenesis is the growth phase, right? Clear? And now the question is, that is the vitellogenesis occurs during the spermatogenesis. So now what is that spermatogenesis? This is the oogenesis, and the question asked from that part, and you can see here these are the follicular stage, right? The follicle cells, the primordial follicle, then primordial follicle converted into the primary, then Graafian follicle, growing follicle, that is vesicular follicle is that, right? And the which is called the Graafian follicle, then the ovulated and secondary oocyte is released, right? So that process is known as the ovulation. Clear? So this is all about the oogenesis. So when question asks the how many if you have the 100 primary oocytes, then how many ovums are formed here? So from 100 primary oocyte, only 100 ovas are formed, right? Because only one ovum is formed from the primary oocyte, right? But now in case when we talk about the spermatogenesis, right? When we talk about the spermatogenesis, then what will happen in case of the spermatogenesis? As its name suggests, spermatogenesis, that is the formation of the sperm, right? So what will happen? See here, again that spermatogenesis is divided into 3 phases, or we can say it is completed into 3 phases. That is, the first one is the multiplication phase, right? In which the mitosis occur and spermatogoniums are formed. Clear? Multiplication phase. Second is the growth phase, and the third one is the maturation phase, right? Third one is the maturation phase. First one is the multiplication phase, second one is the growth phase, third one is the maturation phase. So see here, this is the cut section of the seminiferous tubule, right? That is the cross section of the seminiferous tubule, in which you can see these are the spermatids, right? These are the secondary spermatocyte, then primary spermatocyte, right? And the spermatogonium. So see here, what will happen through the mitotic division, that primary that spermatogonial stem cell mitotically divide and form the spermatogonium. Mitotically division form the primary spermatocyte, and ploidy is same, but in that primary spermatocyte, due to the increased amount of the cytoplasm, right, this cell is the largest cell of the whole primary spermatocyte, right? Primary spermatocyte is the largest cell of the whole spermatogenesis, right? Now what will happen? Then this primary spermatocyte, right, meiosis 1 occurs in that primary spermatocyte, and 2 the cells are formed which are called the secondary spermatocyte. Now because it is meiosis 1, that is reductional phase is there, right? So what will happen? The ploidy gets haploidy, right? The ploidy get haploid from the diploid. Now what will happen when meiosis 2 occurs here, right? That meiosis 2, what will happen here? The through meiosis 2 again, which is that meiosis 2 is the equational division, right? That meiosis 2 is the equational division right? So it forms the 4 from one secondary spermatocyte, it forms the 2 spermatid. Again from 2, that is 2 spermatid. That is when we talk about the one primary spermatocyte form the 4 spermatids, and these spermatids are the immature cells. When the differentiation occurs and Sertoli cells provide the nutrition, then these spermatids converted into the sperm or the spermatozoa. Clear? So that process is known as the spermiogenesis. That process is known as the spermiogenesis, right? That process is known as the spermiogenesis. That is, what is the spermiogenesis? That is transformation of spermatid into spermatozoa, right? Or we can say sperms, right? Sertoli cells is known as the nurse cells or the sustentacular cells. They provide the nutrition to the immature sperms, that is the spermatids, and after that these sperms gets mature. Clear? So that process is known as the spermiogenesis. So you can see here, from one primary spermatocyte 4 sperms are formed, right? So these are the questions of pre-medical which is asked in the previous years, right? So you have to know about the spermatogenesis and the oogenesis, right? So in that way these informations are completed, and the answer of first one is the D, which is the wrong statement, that vitellogenesis occurs in the birds and the reptiles, right? Not occur in the humans because yolk is absent, right? Yolk synthesis is absent in the humans. Clear? That's why vitellogenesis is not occurs. Now come to the next question, that is match the column, right? Match the column. Aristotle. Who is Aristotle? Actually Aristotle is known as the father of embryology, right? Aristotle is known as the father of embryology. So 1 is D. Von Beer is known as the founder of modern embryology. You have to learn all these, right? So the answer of 2, that is C. Ernst Haeckel, that Haeckel is the it gives the phylogenetic concept, right? It gives the phylogenetic concept. So third is A. And the Spemann, he gives the organizer concept, right? He gives the organizer concept. So fourth one is the Bombay, right? So according to that, these 2 options are cancelled. 1D, 2C is given in both, 3A given in only option A, right? So in that case C is also cancelled. So the answer is A. You have to just learn it, right, directly.